Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 item guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are covering my pick for the 20 best items in Baldur's Gate 3 for Act 3 of Honor Mode. These are, on average, the strongest items in the entire game, and include many of the best-in-slot endgame items, so they're going to have a massive impact on the final strength of your builds, and your ability to win the very difficult late-game and endgame battles. Just as with parts 1 and 2 of this video, which you can go check out, of course, if you haven't yet seen those, we're covering the best equippable items in the game here, not consumables and not weapons, which I will be covering in a separate series, and these ratings are based on the very detailed tier lists I have been doing for each of these items, so for more information about any of these items, or the ones that didn't make the list, you can go check out those lists, which are linked in the description below. Just as with part 1 and 2, we are rating these items based on how easy it is to win the game when you use this item as a part of your strategy. That means that we're looking at, of course, the most powerful items, especially important for Act 3, but also the items that show up early, which is also especially important for Act 3, since we're near the end of the game. An item that you get in, like, the third last fight of the game will not have a huge impact on your ability to win that run, because you'll only use it for 2 fights before the game is over. And of course, the items that work with the most different builds and different strategies. Finally, before I begin, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Hyazan X for the €12 donation, Josh Hobbs for the $10 and the call to nerf True Strike, Chris Dillon for the $2, and A. Bester, Feral Ramadan, and 8 Data Bits for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. Alright, let's rate some items. We're going to begin with, again, 2 honorable mentions. The first of these is the Reviving Hand. The Reviving Hands is a strict upgrade to the Hellrider's Pride that we talked about in Act 1, and while it doesn't meaningfully change the play pattern of this character in most cases, it's a strict upgrade to a strategy that's already very powerful, so you are certainly going to put it on if you've been using the Hellrider's Pride up until this point. It does have one notable synergy that the Hellrider's Pride doesn't, which is that it applies Blade Ward to the character when they heal themselves, in addition to applying Blade Ward to everyone else. The Hellrider's Pride doesn't work on self-healing, but the Reviving Hands does. That means that you can Blade Ward your entire party, not all but one of your party, using this item, and also means that characters that self-heal, so characters that are using a regeneration effect or a weapon with lifesteal on it, will be permanently Blade Warded if they have this item equipped. Obviously, that's very powerful, but this doesn't do that much that the Hellrider's Pride don't already do, so they miss out on the top 20, but I wanted to mention this item as a very powerful upgrade to a very powerful strategy. The second of the honorable mentions, the Helmet of Grit. The Helmet of Grit gives you an extra bonus action whenever you are at half HP or lower, so if you're at 50% hit points or lower, you have an extra bonus action every single turn. An extra bonus action every turn is an incredibly powerful effect. Many builds take 3 levels of Rogue, basically just for this effect, and it's one of the best things that you can do for a lot of builds. So going down to 50% hit points is not a significant penalty to pay for characters that want this effect. However, you do have to build around using this item. You have to have a character that wants to start every combat at half hit points, which is dangerous. I don't mean to downplay being at half hit points being dangerous, and you need to have a good use for the bonus action with the Helmet of Grit. For characters that are making offhand attacks, this is an extra offhand attack, so if a 2-weapon fighting character, a dual hand crossbow user, or a monk who's making bonus action attacks with their monk class features or with Flurry of Blows can benefit from the Helmet of Grit, then it's incredibly powerful. But for characters without amazing uses for this effect, or characters that don't want to start fights at half HP, the Helmet of Grit is a little bit harder to use. Because you have to really structure your character's build and your combat strategy of starting at half hit points around using this item, I am placing it as an honorable mention, but for characters that are built around it, it's one of the very best items in the game. If you have a character that's intended to use this, it would probably crack the top 5 items, but you can't just throw it on anyone and have it succeed, which is why I've placed it as an honorable mention. Weighing in at number 20, the Robe of the Weave. The Robe of the Weave gives you a +1 bonus to your spell save DCs and spell attack rolls, which is different from the previous best-in-slot robe for casters, the Protectee Sparks Wall, which only gives you plus save DC and not bonus to your attack rolls. It also gives you +2 armor class, and when you succeed a save against a spell, you heal for 1d6. The healing isn't particularly valuable on this item, so really, this is just an upgrade to the Protectee Sparks Wall, and it's a purely defensive upgrade unless you're making a lot of spell attack rolls. This is the best-in-slot robe for robe casters, for caster characters who want to be in a robe. The Robe of the Weave is the best one out there, but when you put it on, what you're mostly getting is 2 additional armor class compared to the Protectee Sparks Wall. That's not nothing, obviously. 2 armor class is very good, but we would prefer for our items, especially for a spellcaster like that, to provide an offensive bonus, and this doesn't actually increase your offensive capabilities. So this item is very, very good, best in slot, endgame robe for characters that want to wear a robe and are casting spells, but somewhat lower down in the list because it's, in practice, a purely defensive item compared to the items that it's going to be replacing. Coming in at number 19, the Armour of Agility. The Armour of Agility is by far the best defensive option for medium armor characters. It gives you 17 base armor class and allows you to add your entire dexterity modifier. So if you're a character with 20 dexterity, then you have a base AC of 22. And then, of course, you can add additional bonuses to that, like a shield or any bonuses from items or gear or class abilities that you might get. So it's going to give you some of the highest AC in the game just out of the box. And it also gives you a +2 bonus to your saving throws. Dexterity-based characters, especially ones with high AC, like this armor will provide you with, often are very hard to kill with physical attacks because they naturally have high armor class, thanks to all that dexterity, and if they're an archer or a character that wants to be in hiding or moving around, then they will tend not to be targeted by enemies because you'll be able to move out of range of the enemy. So most of these dexterity characters will not be terribly worried about enemies actually attacking them with attack rolls, so the +2 bonus to saving throws shuts off the only way that those characters can actually die or lose fights, by making it much harder for them to fail an important wisdom save or something along those lines. So this just makes your dexterity-based characters more or less invincible when they're wearing the Armour of Agility because of how high the AC values that you get are and the fact that it gives you a save bonus, which is both powerful in and of itself and also synergizes with the types of characters that want to wear this and with the high AC that this armor gives you. So it's a very internally synergistic item. The Armour of Agility is also notable in that it lets you reach the theoretically highest armor class values in the entire game. With 17 base AC, plus your full dexterity modifier, plus you can add additional bonuses from items and class abilities and everything, you can reach AC in the mid-30s relatively easily with the Armour of Agility from shields and other bonuses and the shield spell and stuff like that, and no enemies in the game can hit those armor class values. So with the Armour of Agility, you can also reach AC that is just too high for the enemies in the game to be able to hit. So not only can this item just be great when you don't optimize around it at all and just put it on any dexterity-based character and then they just won't die, you can also optimize around increasing your AC values to the highest possible numbers, and then that character becomes effectively invincible. The reason that this item isn't higher up on the list, despite all the really awesome things that it does do, is that it is a purely defensive item. Compared to the previous item in this category, the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail, which gives you a bonus to your initiative, the Armour of Agility doesn't provide any offensive capability. It makes your character very, very hard to kill, which is great, but again, offense typically is more useful in an item than defense, especially for a character like an archer who just wants to kill enemies before they get a chance to go. So the Armour of Agility is excellent for defensive characters, but purely defensive in nature, which is why it shows up at number 19. Coming in at number 18, the Crypt Lord Ring. The Crypt Lord Ring gives you, once per long rest, the ability to cast Create Undead to summon a mummy. The mummy is the worst of the 6th level summons, but it's still a 6th level summon. The Crypt Lord Ring basically gives you a day-long buff, a super powerful day-long buff, for free. Not having to spend a 6th level spell slot on this effect makes it much more useful and much more powerful because you get the mummy, and that can help you just beat up enemies for the entire day. Summons in Baldur's Gate are incredibly powerful because you can use them both to control the battlefield by blocking choke points, keeping enemies at bay, distracting enemy attacks. They give your whole party extra total hit points because enemies will often attack them instead of your more valuable party members. And, of course, they increase your total damage output and action economy. So getting a really powerful summon for free is great for just about every party. The Crypt Lord ring does have the problem that the summon that it gives you is good, but not amazing, and you can often duplicate this effect with more powerful summons with something like the Spellcrux Amulet to refresh an actual 6th level slot, and then you could use the Summon Myrmidon, for example, to get a much better summon than the Mummy. But the Crypt Lord ring is free, and free is great. If you take short adventuring days so that the mummy is less likely to have its HP worn down over the course of the day, because it's undead, so it's difficult to heal, then the Crypt Lord ring will be even better because you'll have a full health summon for every fight. So if you long rest frequently to refresh the ability on this ring more often, then it will be even more powerful. But even if you take very long adventuring days, this will give you a lot of additional hit point absorption, a lot of additional damage absorption in your party, a lot of additional damage output, and a ton of utility effectively for free because it costs you only the resource of the item, not the resource of a spell or anything else that your party has to use. Free value is good, and this is free value. Everyone can use it. It's especially good for summon-focused parties that have ways to buff the mummy, of course. But it doesn't have to be a party that's focused around summons in order to benefit from this item. One notable thing about this item is that if you want Create Undead specifically for like a necromancer, it's actually kind of hard to get because there's no scrolls of Create Undead, so you have to actually level to level 11 in a class that gives you the spell in order to learn it. So this gives you access to a powerful undead summon for like a necromancer multi-class character without having to actually take 11 levels of wizard. Weighing in at number 17, the Amulet of Greater Health. Now, I expect there's going to be a lot of very surprised people in the comments that the Amulet of Greater Health shows up this far down the list, because this is a ludicrously powerful effect. The Amulet of Greater Health sets your Constitution score to 23, so no matter what your Constitution was on your character sheet, you now have 23, which gives you plus 6 hit points per level for a massive bonus to your hit points, and, of course, frees up those attribute points to move into other attributes. It also gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws, so if you're a spellcaster, you now have a plus 6 con save, plus any proficiency that you might have, and advantage, meaning that you'll very rarely drop concentration on your spell checks if you have this item equipped. This is a tremendously powerful effect, but there are a couple things that hold this item back a little bit, and that's why I've placed it at number 17. The first is that this is a very competitive item slot. The amulet, there's a lot of very good offensive amulets, and the Amulet of Greater Health is mostly defensive. You do, of course, get a couple attribute points back, which you can put in an attribute that you might need, so you can gain a little bit of strength or a little bit of dexterity, depending on what your character has focused on more. But this isn't like the Gloves of Dexterity or the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength that lets you replace a primary attribute and move those, and then not have to take feats to increase that attribute. Like if you have an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength, you don't have to take any ASIs for Strength, but you weren't going to take ASIs for Constitution anyways, so unlike the other attribute replacing items, this one doesn't give you feats back. The Amulet of Greater Health also shows up quite late in the game, so while this is a very powerful item, it's not going to impact as much of the game as some of the other items on this list. Nevertheless, this is still a tremendously good item that anybody can wear and get a massive benefit out of. It's especially good for spellcasters if you are finding that your spellcasters are dropping concentration on their spells a lot. The Amulet of Greater Health will totally solve that problem. You will never have that problem again. And it's really, really good for multi-attribute dependent characters, especially characters like paladins or monks that really need high values in a lot of different attributes, the Amulet of Greater Health can be of tremendous benefit to those characters by letting them move points into an attribute that they struggled to get high numbers in. The Amulet of Greater Health also is especially notable for barbarians, because it can be used for an unarmored barbarian to increase their armor class, or monk barbarian multi-classes, because it can increase their armor class as well. Barbarians themselves don't benefit a ton from this, because it's not more AC than they would get just from wearing armor. But for a monk barbarian multi-class, you have other reasons not to wear armor, so you still get like very high AC from this. So there's a lot of synergies, and some builds will definitely want the Amulet of Greater Health more than others, but any character can benefit from this, because it's just a huge amount of hit points, it's a huge amount of constitution save, stops you from dropping concentration on your spells, great item that lets you get a ton of value, especially with respecs, and powers up your party tremendously if you put it on. At number 16, the Flame Enamelled Armour. The Flame Enamelled Armour is a medium armor with 16 AC, so it's certainly not the highest AC medium armor out there, but it gives you, in addition to that, +2 to your initiative rolls, resistance to fire damage, a +2 bonus to your saving throws, and you can cast Fire Shield once per long rest. The Fire Shield component of this isn't a huge benefit unless you're facing an enemy with lots of cold damage, because then it also gives you resistance to cold. So this item effectively gives you resistance to both cold and fire for fights where you need it. But the real benefit of this armor is just that it gives you a +2 bonus to your initiative rolls. Initiative, I have talked about many times over the course of this list, is one of the most powerful things that you can get from items. The Flame Enamelled Armor can let you get a feat back if you can reach high enough initiative without having to take alert, then you can put that into another feat, maybe a more offensively focused one. And so this armor just shores up any weaknesses of a medium armored character, especially a low dexterity one, while providing a ton of benefits. Also, for some of the more difficult fights in the game with high elemental damage incoming, the Flame Enamelled Armor fixes those problems immediately. It's mostly used by low dexterity medium armor characters, so ones with 14 or 16 dexterity. High dexterity characters will prefer the Yuan-Ti Scale or the Armour of Agility, but for low dex characters, it completely solves the initiative problems that those characters have, while providing you with good armor class, great resistances, and a +2 to bonus to saving throws, which of course is awesome in and of itself. Special mention of this armor for barbarians, which often struggle with initiative because it can be hard for barbarians to invest enough in dexterity, and they often want items in slots that you would normally put initiative items in. Some barbarians have high feat requirements, so they struggle to take alert in their builds. So the Flame Enamelled Armor just totally fixes all of those problems in a single item, which is awesome because it just powers up those builds tremendously. Initiative is good. This gives you initiative. There's not much more to it. Coming in at number 15, the Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo. The Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo give you your Wisdom modifier as damage on every unarmed attack. Obviously, this is only good for monks who are making a lot of unarmed attacks and have high Wisdom modifiers as a matter of course, but it's going to be best in slot for basically every monk build out there. The Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo, sort of at base, if you have like 14 Wisdom on your monk, will increase all of your attacks by +2 damage, and monks will often be making 6 to 8 attacks in a round, so that's already a huge amount of damage. But they get even better when you combine them with items that allow you to skip other attributes and raise your Wisdom higher. A monk who's using the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength can easily have 16 Wisdom. A monk who's using the Gloves of Dexterity can easily have 18 Wisdom, because they can then put all of their ASIs into their Wisdom and get to 20. And so if you have 20 Wisdom, and this is giving you +5 to +5 damage on all of your unarmed attacks, that's a huge amount of bonus damage. For an open hand monk, this obviously combines with your Wisdom to unarmed damage already, so you're getting double your Wisdom modifier to unarmed damage, and for an open hand monk, you might want to reach 22 or 24 Wisdom in order to have massive bonuses to each of your unarmed strikes. For a character that can make 8 or 10 attacks in a round, this is going to give you something like an extra 100 damage in a round. So the boots of Uninhibited Kushigo are a truly enormous benefit to some of the most broken builds in the game, but also just any monk in general can benefit from this item with a huge amount of bonus damage, even if you aren't building around abusing this item specifically. The reason that it's not higher on the list is just that it's only a monk item, so if you don't have a monk in the party, you can ignore this item pretty safely, but for monks, this is such an incredible item that you absolutely should pay attention to it, because if you have a monk, they should be wearing these boots. Coming in at number 14, the Armour of Persistence. The Armour of Persistence is just the best heavy armor in the game for heavy armor users. There's basically no competition in this slot at this point, so the Armour of Persistence is a huge upgrade over previous heavy armors, and will make your character much, much harder to kill. The Armour of Persistence gives you 20 base armor class, so that's the highest armor class in the game, with the exception of one other armor that we'll talk about a little bit later down the line. Reduces all incoming damage by 2, and gives you resistance and blade ward permanently. Permanent blade ward, of course, makes you take half damage from all physical damage, all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and then that halved damage is then reduced by the damage reduction on the Armour of Persistence. If you have Heavy Armor Master or other damage reduction effects, that can stack to make your character take only tiny amounts of damage every time they get hit. Resistance is a very powerful cantrip that you don't usually want to concentrate on as a cantrip, but when you get it for free, plus D4 to all your saving throws that stacks with Bless and everything, makes this character basically immune to spells, and basically immune to physical damage, so the character just can't die if they're wearing the Armour of Persistence. You have super high armor class, you have Blade Ward, so you are permanently taking half damage from physical damage, and you have a huge bonus to your spell saving throws, so enemies can't really take you out with spells, they can't take you out with damage, they are helpless to do anything to you. Obviously, that makes for a great set of heavy armor, though again, this is a purely defensive armor, and it is worth noting that Blade Ward from the Armour of Persistence doesn't stack with Blade Ward from the Reviving Hand. So parties that are built around using the buff on heal items will get a lot less value out of the Armour of Persistence, or parties that are doing like camp casting with Blade Ward, with Warding Bond clerics and stuff like that, will get a lot less value out of the Armour of Persistence than parties that are set up to use those effects already. So, sort of, for heavy armor users, this is going to be an incredible armor, though there are some cases where you won't necessarily need its effect because you can duplicate them with other items. But it's just such a powerful item that solves every defensive need of a character all by itself that it's very much worth picking up, of course. At number 13, the Legacy of the Masters. The Legacy of the Masters gives you a +2 bonus to your attack rolls and to your damage rolls with weapons. The tooltip here is a little misleading. This actually gives you a +2 bonus to all attack rolls, not just attack rolls with weapons, so you get a +2 bonus to your attack rolls with weapons, unarmed attacks, and spells, but only a +2 bonus to the damage rolls of weapons. So this basically is just a +2 bonus to all of your attacks on any character that's attacking. At this point in the game, you probably shouldn't need a huge bonus to your attack rolls. Your characters should be hitting very reliably. You should have found ways to gain advantage. But if you do need to increase your attack rolls, this is one of the absolute best ways in the game to do it. And so the Legacy of the Masters just lets you land your attacks. A +2 bonus to your attack rolls is a significant bonus. So if you are still missing attacks at this point in the game, or if you need to hit particularly high AC enemies, then the Legacy of the Masters is excellent. It's especially good for archers or Great Weapon Master characters who have the penalty to attack rolls from those feats. So the Legacy of the Masters can counteract that penalty with the +2 bonus. And for multi-attribute dependent characters who haven't been able to raise their primary attribute all the way to 20, let's say you're a heavily multi-classed character that's still stuck at 18 dexterity, or something along those lines, the Legacy of the Masters can boost your hit chance up to the point where you're hitting just as reliably as a character with maximum numbers in your primary attributes. It does work for warlocks as well, so if your warlock is missing their Eldritch Blast, then you can put that on them. It works for fire sorcerers with Scorching Ray, so this can help you land your initial Scorching Ray before you stack Arcane Acuity. So it has a lot of uses for characters that just need to land their shots. And +2 bonus is a huge bonus, so the Legacy of the Masters, great item. At number 12, the Cloak of Displacement. The Cloak of Displacement gives you, every turn, the cloak activates, giving you 2 turns of a displacement effect, which gives enemies disadvantage on all of their attack rolls against you. As soon as you take damage, the effect goes away. So the Cloak of Displacement will go away if you're taking incidental damage, like from the arena, if you're standing in fire or hazardous areas, if you get hit by a spell. But otherwise, unless you get hit by an enemy attack, which they have disadvantage on all their attacks, then the Cloak of Displacement will give you permanent disadvantage to attacks against you. That's very, very powerful, obviously, for any character that is worried about getting hit, which is most characters. The Cloak of Displacement's especially good for really high AC characters, because they'll never get hit. If you have 27 AC and enemies have disadvantage on attacks against you, basically no enemies in the game will reliably hit you, so you'll gain the maximum benefit out of this effect. Or for really low AC characters, because the Cloak of Displacement will discourage enemies from attacking them. A character with like 16 armor class, but disadvantage on attacks against them, the AI will often prioritize attacking higher AC characters, so your tankier characters will absorb shots if your weaker characters have the Cloak of Displacement equipped. The Cloak of Displacement also is special because it's an item that sort of works for druids. I actually haven't tested this in patch 7, so it's possible it was patched out, but while this item doesn't work in wild shape, if you start a combat in humanoid form, it gives you the buff, and then if you then wild shape, you keep the buff, so enemies will have disadvantage attacking your wild shape form with the Cloak of Displacement, which makes it notable as one of the few items that actually helps improve wild shapes. So the Cloak of Displacement is very, very good for wild shaping druids. Assuming that still works, please let me know in the comments below. The real bonus of the Cloak of Displacement, though, is that it's a cloak, which is not a heavily contested slot, so this is just an incredible item in a slot that, at this point in the game, your characters probably have nothing relevant equipped in on at least one of your party members, so getting the Cloak of Displacement gives you a huge defensive benefit, effectively for free, because you're just not replacing anything valuable with it. So unlike a lot of these other, maybe potentially more powerful Act 3 items, the Cloak of Displacement isn't bumping out an Act 1 or Act 2 item, and just gives you all of its powerful benefit for free. So that's why it shows up high on the list, despite being a purely defensive benefit, is that it's not fighting with anything else for this place. Coming in at number 11, the Cloak of the Weave. The Cloak of the Weave gives you a +1 bonus to your save DC and attack roll and spell attack rolls, which obviously we've talked about how good increases to your spell save DC are at some length already in this tier list. And I already mentioned that because it's a cloak, it's not really competing with any other items for this slot. So this just powers up your casters quite significantly effectively for free. It also gives you the Absorb Elements reaction, the same as the Nature Cleric reaction, where if an enemy hits you with an elemental effect, with elemental damage, you can use your reaction to take half damage instead once per short rest. So if you're going to get hit by a big fireball, you can use your reaction to take half damage. This is less useful than it might seem because this item is usually on a caster. If you're going to take a dangerous amount of damage from a spell, you can probably just counterspell that spell instead, but it's certainly not a totally useless effect because there's a lot of incidental elemental damage in the game, and this just makes you more resilient to it. It can also prevent something going really wrong if you take an unexpected huge burst of elemental damage. Maybe an enemy blew up an explosive barrel next to you or something. When you do that, you gain a very small damage bonus. You gain an extra d6 of that damage type on your next weapon attack. There are some characters that can make use of that, but that's such a minor benefit of the Cloak of the Weave that you can pretty safely ignore it, because this is really a caster item, and they often won't be making weapon attacks to benefit from that effect. But +1 save DC and spell attack rolls for casters in an item slot that doesn't have much competition at all is obviously going to be incredible, so the Cloak of the Weave is going to be the cloak that all of your casters are going to be fighting over wearing. And coming in at number 10, entering the top 10 items in Baldur's Gate 3, we have the Helldusk Gloves. The Helldusk Gloves give you a +1 bonus to your spell attack rolls, although you'll notice that the image here says see notes, and the note there is that, in fact, it gives you a +1 bonus to all of your attack rolls, not just spell attacks, and spell save DC. So you get a +1 bonus to every attack roll you make, and to spell save DC. Your weapon attacks deal an extra d6 fire damage, your unarmed strikes deal an extra d6 necrotic damage, and inflict bleeding is the same as the lesser Helldusk Gloves. And you get a once per short rest spell, which is a mediocre spell. It's basically the equivalent of like a level 2.5-ish spell. It's a little better than a level 2 spell, but a little worse than most level 3 spells. Once per short rest. That's not a huge bonus, but is still relevant. If you take really long adventuring days, then those extra resources can come in handy. But the main benefit of these gloves are, of course, the passive bonuses to your attack rolls and damage on any character that's attacking, or your spell save DC on any character that requires higher spell save DC. The Helldusk Gloves do show up fairly late in the game, but of course they are a massive benefit to everyone. They're going to be one of the best in slot gloves in your party for the end game. Any character can make use of these, which is part of why they're so good, is that there's basically no character that can't benefit from the Helldusk Gloves. Maybe a purely support-focused character wouldn't be able to use these, but otherwise any character can benefit from them, so your party will always get an upgrade when you have this weapon. Especially good, of course, for characters that are making a lot of multi-attacks, because a +1 bonus to hit is really good for those characters, and the extra damage is extremely relevant. Good for characters with fire damage synergy, good for monks, good for everybody. The Helldusk Gloves are hugely powerful, and would show up higher on the list if they didn't show up so late in the game. Coming in at number 9, Viconia's Walking Fortress. The Walking Fortress is the legendary shield in the game, the only legendary shield, so you'd expect it to be quite powerful in order to live up to its legendary status, and it is. Viconia's Walking Fortress gives you 3 armor class. It's the only shield in the game that gives you 3 armor class and a magical effect, so already it's giving you higher AC and a bunch of bonus effects compared to the other shields available. And those effects, wow, are so good. Viconia's Walking Fortress gives you advantage on saves against spells, and spell attack rolls against you have disadvantage. That makes you nearly immune to spellcasters, because you're going to pass all your saves against their spells. They won't be able to hit you with spell attacks. And when enemies attack you in melee, you get an improved Shield Bash reaction, which will cost them the rest of their turn. So it's the same as Shield Bash from other shields that we've talked about in previous episodes, which can cost enemies the rest of their turn. If you hit them on the first attack of their turn, then they'll go prone and lose the rest of their turn. Super powerful, of course. The additional damage isn't a huge benefit, but, you know, you'll take it. 2d4 force damage isn't totally useless, and this is just a better version of an already very good reaction. And gives you Reflective Shell once per short rest as a bonus action. Reflective Shell's sort of a weird ability, but it effectively makes you completely immune to ranged attacks, and ranged attackers cannot harm a character who has Reflective Shell activated for 2 full turns, and if they do attack you, then the attacks return to target the character that fired them. The AI is not good. It doesn't about this item also, it doesn't understand not to shoot characters that have this equipped, though those characters often won't be the targets of ranged attacks because they will tend to have very high AC just naturally because they're a shield user with the +3 armor class equipped. So the Walking Fortress, in summary, makes you immune to spells, very, very good against melee attackers, and immune to ranged attacks. That's all of the enemies in the game. They basically all fall into one of those three categories, and the Walking Fortress solves your defensive needs against all of those three categories. So for any defensive character, this item just absolutely dominates encounters. Coming in at number 8, the Gloves of Soul Catching. The Gloves of Soul Catching are a funny one, because this is a monk-only item, basically, but it's so good for monks that it definitely deserves its spot right up here in the top 10. The Gloves of Soul Catching give you an extra d10 of force damage on every unarmed attack, which is a massive damage bonus, especially, of course, for a monk who's making 1,000,000 attacks every round. Give you +2 to your Constitution, which any character can benefit from. This only goes up to a maximum of 20, but unless you have the Amulet of Greater Health equipped, basically no characters will have 20 Constitution, because you'll have put your ASIs into your primary stats rather than into Constitution, so you will be gaining a benefit from +2 Con. And this is especially good for monks who can often struggle to get enough Constitution because of their multi-attribute dependency, and who are relatively squishy for melee characters because they have a lower hit die than other melee characters and may not have as high Constitution because of their high attribute requirements. So the Gloves of Soul Catching solves one of the inherent weaknesses of monks entirely by making up for that lower hit die, gives them a massive amount of damage bonus on every single unarmed strike, and once per turn, whenever you hit an enemy with an unarmed attack, which of course you're going to do, you can heal for 10, but don't let that fool you, because that's not that important. You can instead forego healing to gain advantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the end of your next turn. So this works for the whole of this turn and the whole of the next turn. You gain effectively 2 turns of advantage on attack rolls and saving throws, making your character immune to what enemies are doing, because advantage on saving throws is so powerful, but also making it so that you always hit all your attacks. You get more critical hits, which of course synergize very, very well with the d10 force damage, because that's doubled on a critical hit. So the Gloves of Soul Catching just power up monks to the absolute moon. These are a huge upgrade over the gloves that you are probably wearing up to this point, which will be like an extra d4 of damage. A d4 of damage per attack is an average 2.5 damage every attack. d10 of damage is an average 5.5 damage every attack, so it more than doubles that bonus. It's also force damage, which is the best damage type in the game, and all of the other benefits that I've described besides. The Gloves of Soul Catching are made for monks. They're the legendary monk gloves, so they should be good for monks, and they sure are. There's no monk in the game that won't want to wear these items. Coming in at number 7, the Hood of the Weave. The Hood of the Weave gives you a +2 bonus to your spell save DCs and spell attack rolls. A +2 bonus to your save DCs is a ludicrously strong bonus. That's almost certainly a totally unbalanced amount of increased spell save DC for a single item to give you, because a +2 bonus makes you that much better at locking enemies out of the fight before they can ever act. The Hood of the Weave would show up much higher on this list if it wasn't competing with items that do the same thing, only even more broken, the Arcane Acuity helmets. But for non-Arcane Acuity characters, a +2 bonus is still a massive bonus to your spell save DCs. So for any wizard or sorcerer who's not stacking Arcane Acuity, the Hood of the Weave is going to power up that character dramatically. It's also very useful for druids, for clerics, just because this is sort of aesthetically a wizard or sorcerer item doesn't mean that it can't go on other characters. Notice that it gives you a +2 bonus to your spell attack rolls as well, so it's really, really good for warlocks who both make spell attack rolls and require high save DCs, and this is just going to make your spellcasters wildly more reliable and more powerful. Obviously, there is a conflict with characters that are built around using Arcane Acuity, so the Hood of the Weave is going to be worse if your party is set up with characters that use that, because Acuity is just that powerful a mechanic that it pushes out even this incredibly powerful item from the top 5, because it takes the same item slot. But the Hood of the Weave's bonus is so huge that you're going to be using it on any character that can make use of it. Weighing in at number 6, just outside of the top 5, the Helm of Balduran. The Helm of Balduran is a medium armor helmet, legendary helmet. And the medium armor proficiency is actually important because most characters can get medium armor proficiency fairly easily. So it's not like Grimm's Helm where you need heavy armor proficiency, so only a very few characters can use it. The Helm of Balduran's fairly widely available. And it gives you a +1 bonus to your armor class and saving throws. There's actually very few helmets. I think this is in fact the only helmet that increases your armor class. So the Helm of Balduran, it gives you an AC benefit from a slot that doesn't otherwise give that to you very easily. So it increases your armor class even further and increases your saving throws with the same internal synergy that other increases to saving throws combined with defensive items have, like the Armour of Agility, for example. When you are immune to critical hits and have increased armor class and are healing every turn, and one of the only ways you can lose combat is if you fail a save against a debilitating saving throw targeted effect. The Helm of Balduran both makes it much harder for you to die to physical damage and harder for you to lose to saving throws. It also makes you immune to critical hits, which is incredibly important. I've talked extensively in the Act 1 section of this list about why that's so good, because it removes variance from combat, both decreases the average damage that you take, but also completely removes huge spikes of damage, which are one of the few ways to lose honor mode at this late in the game, is to take a huge unexpected spike of damage and have a character go down. And it heals you for 2 hit points at the beginning of every turn, which works even if you're down. So even if this character does take a huge spike of damage and go down, they will immediately heal themselves and get back up without you having to spend an action. The healing is also really synergistic with items like the Reviving Hands or other self-heal triggering items, so you can be constantly blade warded from the healing effect of this item as well. But the real prize for defensive characters here is immunity to stun. Stun is probably the most dangerous condition in the game. There's a lot of stunning enemies, especially in the last few fights in the game. There's a lot of effects that stun, so immunity to stun just makes this character wildly less endangered by some of the most dangerous enemies and effects in the game. If this character is a cleric who can prepare freedom of movement, they can then break your allies out of stun, or you can use scrolls or other effects that let you cast freedom of movement to have this character break your other allies out of stun. So it gives you options even if things are going wrong. Obviously, this is a purely defensive item, but it's one of the absolute best defensive items in the game because it gives you immunity to 2 of the easiest ways to lose honor mode runs, which is stun immunity and critical hits, and the stats that it gives you are incredible. Any character can make use of this, of course. Just like other AC bonuses, characters with especially high AC will benefit even more, or especially low AC. It's also especially notable for solo play because stun immunity is, again, if you're going into the last couple fights in a solo run, getting stunned and then taken out is one of the easiest ways to lose a solo run. So this just makes that impossible for that to happen. So the Helm of Balduran just gives you a tremendous safety net and removes some of the very few ways that late game honor mode parties can still lose the game. Incredible defensive item, very important for late game setups. Now, despite all that, the Helm of Balduran isn't the best purely defensive item in the game. That honor goes to item number 5 on the list, so breaking into the top 5, at number 5, the Helldusk Armour. The Helldusk Armour is 21 AC heavy armor, so even higher armor class value than the Armour of Persistence, but the Helldusk Armour counts you as proficient when you're wearing it, so you don't need heavy armor proficiency in order to wear it. That gives any character, unarmored characters, characters with light armor proficiency, super high AC effectively for free, and so any character can put this on to solve all of their defensive problems with a single item. The fact that this works for anybody is what makes it so good, because most parties are going to have one character that's sort of struggling defensively by the time you get this item. for a spellcaster or something, you're probably feeling the robes at this point, and the fact that you have relatively low armor class. The Helldusk Armour totally solves all of those problems and fixes your party's defensive flaws instantly with a single armor, and it works no matter what party, no matter how your party is composed, because anyone can use it. A couple things about the Helldusk Armour. Firstly, there are ways to get it in Act 1, where obviously it's even more broken, but I'm rating it as though you acquire it at the point where the game intends you to get it, and so it's still a top 5 item, even at that point. Because of just how powerful it is to be able to have 21 base armor class on any character, no matter their proficiencies. A couple other bonuses that it gives you resistance to fire damage and damage reduction of 3 from all the damage that you would take. So you gain, you are much harder to kill for fire damage, which is a fairly common damage type, although less so at the point in the game where you get this item. And you take 3 less damage from every source, so you're going to be able to tank through a lot of stuff that you couldn't before, because small amount of damage, and if you combine this with other resistances or Abjuration Wizardhood, then you can make every bit of damage that you take small, will be reduced even further by the Helldusk Armour. Combined with Heavy Armor Master, because it does still count as Heavy Armor for Heavy Armor Master, to give you a -6 damage reduction to every damage instance that you would take, which basically turns off incoming damage. The other bonuses of this item are not that significant. When you succeed a saving throw, the caster receives burning. Not tremendous, though it can turn off enemy concentrations. The ability to cast fly as a bonus action is useful, of course, but by this point in the game, you should have solved your mobility issues, so you won't need to for your party, so you won't need to be able to cast fly. But the amount of defensive utility the Helldusk Armour gives you on any party member is massive. Especially useful for spellcasters, because they will, at this point in the game, maybe need the armor class. And for monks, because the Helldusk Armour weirdly does not cost you unarmored movement. It will cost you unarmored defense, so you won't gain your wisdom to armor class in addition to the 21 AC, but you can still move fast while wearing this armor. So a monk who has low armor class can benefit massively from the Helldusk Armour to fix all their defensive issues. The only characters that can't use this armor are barbarians, because it does impede rage. It counts as heavy armor for the purposes of rage, so you can't rage while wearing it. But other than that, any character can put this on and become so much harder to kill that it'll just shore up all the problems that your party is having in terms of defense. At item number 4, the Amulet of the Devout. This gives you a +2 bonus to your spell save DC, and an additional use of Channeled Divinity once per long rest, although actually once per short rest, because the item's a little bit bugged. And there's some weird stuff you can do with taking this off and putting it on to refresh them. There's a bunch of stuff, but basically the Amulet of the Devout gives you +2 bonus to your spell save DC. +2 bonus to your save DC, yep, that's a huge bonus, and unlike the Hood of the Weave, this doesn't conflict with the Arcane Acuity helmets, so you can use this on an Arcane Acuity character. You can use it in combination with the Hood of the Weave for a +4 bonus to your save DC, and never fail spells that way. So the Amulet of the Devout just massively powers up your spellcasters. Bonuses to your save DCs, as I have said many times in this list, are one of the absolute most powerful things that an item can give you. This gives you 2 of it, so it's amazing. You don't have to be a cleric to make use of this, though of course clerics benefit even more from extra Channeled Divinity, but any spellcaster can use this for a huge benefit. Land your spells, kill your enemies, and just be happy. Amulet of the Devout. And entering the top 3 items, weighing in at number 3, the Mask of Soul Perception. The Mask of Soul Perception is a helmet that everybody can wear, that increases your attack rolls and initiative rolls by 2, and your perception checks by 2. It also gives you Detect Thoughts once per short rest. We can safely ignore Detect Thoughts, and we can safely ignore the perception checks. At this point in the game, you will not really need either of those things, and this character won't necessarily be the one doing them, but a +2 bonus to your attack rolls and initiative rolls on a helmet that anybody can wear is obviously an absurd bonus. Any character can use initiative, almost any character can use attack rolls, so the Massive Soul Perception can go on any party member to power up your party dramatically. Obviously, this is best on characters that are struggling to hit their attacks, so Great Weapon Master characters, Archer characters, characters that need bonuses to their attack rolls because they're multi-attribute dependent, so they don't have the highest possible attributes in their primary attribute, but the Mask of Soul Perception just lets you hit your attacks. So much like the Amulet of the Devout, this just gives you a bonus that everyone can use in huge amounts. Initiative is great, attack rolls are great, this gives you both. Mask of Soul Perception is great, it's just a huge pile of stats in a single item. Coming in at number 2, the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. The Band of the Mystic Scoundrel gives you the ability to, when you hit an enemy with a weapon attack, you can then cast an illusion or enchantment spell as a bonus action. This effectively gives characters that are both making weapon attacks and casting spells permanent haste, because it doubles their action economy. You can hit an enemy with a weapon and then cast a spell as a bonus action. This will stack with normal sources of haste, so if you're already hasted, this is a 50% increase in your action economy. If you aren't hasted, it's a 100% increase in the number of actions that you're taking in a turn. The restriction to illusion or enchantment spells is not a significant restriction, because it includes some of the most dangerous spells in the entire game, like Command, Hold Person, or Hypnotic Pattern, but also includes a bunch of spells that are just good to cast as bonus actions. Stuff like Invisibility can set you up defensively very well. You can hit an enemy, then cast Invisibility and Vanish, or even just Vicious Mockery increases your damage output pretty dramatically. Obviously, the characters that this is best for are hybrid characters that are both making weapon attacks and casting spells, most notably sword bards, but paladins can attack and then cast command as a bonus action. Warlocks, Pact of the Blade warlocks can attack and then cast command as a bonus action. You'll notice that command as a bonus action comes up a lot with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. And so characters that are both making weapon attacks and casting spells gain the most benefit, but it's not required. Any weapon attacker can use this to then cast even low-level illusion or enchantment spells like invisibility or whatever for a little bit of additional value, and that's still a very powerful use case. But obviously, the most powerful use case is giving your sword bard permanent haste. The Band of the Mystic Scoundrel also combines very well with one of the other most broken effects in the entire game, the helmets or hats of Arcane Acuity, because the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, you'll notice that one triggers when you make a weapon attack. So if you make a weapon attack when you have those two items equipped, then you gain 2 stacks of Arcane Acuity, and can use those 2 stacks immediately to cast Command or Hypnotic Pattern with high enough save DC that enemies cannot resist the spell. That combination is probably the single most powerful strategy in Honor Mode. Having the Helmet of Arcane Acuity and the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel equipped on a hybrid character, I believe, is the single best strategy in Honor Mode. It's part of what I consider to be the very best character in the game. The Sword Bard Archer uses those items to both do tremendous weapon damage and have unresistably powerful spells. This is just such a broken effect because it gives you permanent haste. It gives you way more actions than you're supposed to be able to take, and it does so with tremendous synergy with one of the most broken effects in the game. So the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel is just a ludicrously powerful item. You can build your character around this, or just use it on any character that can benefit from it, and it will power up that character massively, to the point where the game will often be much too easy when you're using this item. And weighing in at number 1, the very best item in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3, drumroll please, the Bhaalist Armour. The Bhaalist Armour is a light armor, and it's the only light armor that has appeared on any of these lists, but luckily it makes up for the failures of every other piece of light armor in the game. Bhaalist Armour gives you 14 base armor class and a +2 to your initiative rolls, which already makes it basically the best light armor in the game. It would be best in slot for a lot of builds, even without its other ability. However, the Bhaalist Armour does have another ability. That ability, Aura of Murder, makes enemies within 7 feet of you, so just a slightly larger radius than melee range, become vulnerable to piercing damage. The tooltip here says unless they are resistant or immune to it. That tooltip is a lie. That is not at all true. What it actually means is they become vulnerable to piercing damage even if they are resistant or immune to it. And that vulnerability replaces resistance. So against an enemy who was previously resistant to piercing damage, it not only doubles, but actually quadruples the amount of damage that that enemy was going to be taking from piercing damage. Vulnerability, especially passive vulnerability like this, is something that Dungeons & Dragons does not give to the player. Dungeons & Dragons is very carefully balanced around the amount of damage that characters can output in a round. And so Baldur's Gate giving you vulnerability on everything for free forever means that the game's intended balance and the amount of hit points that enemies have are just completely thrown out of whack. When an enemy is vulnerable to your attacks, you kill them twice as quickly as you would otherwise. So a combat that was intended to take 4 turns will now take 2 turns. A combat that was intended to take 2 turns will now be over in 1 turn, usually before an enemy acts at all. The Bhaalist Armour, of course, gives vulnerability to piercing damage, and so only works for builds that are centered around piercing damage. But luckily, that's a very easy damage type to deal. It's one of the 3 physical damage types, so any dagger build, any archer build, can make use of the Bhaalist Armour to deal double damage on every single one of their attacks, with the very easy condition to meet of just having a character wear this armor and be somewhat near their target. You can have the character that's actually dealing the piercing damage wear this armor, probably best for dagger builds. You can also have a different character wear this armor. If you have an archer stay at the back line, a melee character can move up with the Bhaalist Armour, then the archer will deal double damage. Archers, of course, can also use this armor themselves because the 7-foot radius is notably larger than 5 feet. So the archer can move up to just outside of melee range. Enemies will be in the aura, but the archer will not be taking disadvantage for attacking while threatened. So you can use the Bhaalist Armour in order to deal damage as a sort of melee-focused archer. The math on this item is just busted. Doubling all your damage is way too powerful. Luckily, this item is a somewhat restrictive item. You only get it if you follow a certain quest path. So most parties won't accidentally ruin the game for themselves by putting on this item and suddenly discovering that every encounter is trivial. You do have to sort of go out of your way to pick it up. But when you do, every encounter will be trivial because you do double damage with every single attack. The Bhaalist Armour gives you an effect that you just really shouldn't have access to in Dungeons & Dragons. It's not balanced around this effect, and so that's why it is the #1 item in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the 20 best items in Baldur's Gate 3 Act 3, and I hope you enjoyed parts 1 and 2 of this series, where we looked at Act 1 and 2. If you haven't checked out those videos, then definitely do so. Act 1 and 2 are even more important than Act 3 for itemization, so you'll find those videos even more useful for equipping your parties than this one was, and I hope they were all extremely useful for helping you to equip your honor mode parties. If you think that there's an item that I misplaced, misrated, or that was left off the list that you think really deserves a place, then definitely do let me know in the comments. I'm very open to revising my opinion if presented with a good argument. So, let me know your favorite item and why you think it deserves a spot on this list, or if you think that there's stuff that I should move around based on what we've covered today, then definitely let me know that as well. As always, of course, feel free to hit like and leave a comment if you enjoyed the video. Those things do help me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to engage with the video for YouTube's metrics. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 analysis and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends, and I will catch you next time.